We're recording. Oh,
Here is a comparison of the real estate tax and land value taxation in the areas where the land is potentially profitable for high-rise buildings. Land value taxation requires no special interest rates or tax abatements or subsidies of any kind. The current tax system grossly reduces the penalty for holding idle and grossly underused land. The tax on buildings prohibits the full economic use of land. The infrastructure is underused, and there is a shortage of jobs and housing, while cities are short of revenue. It results in buildings that were never replaced as population increased and the highest and best use became much, much higher. Or surface parking lots that pay taxes while the land appreciates in value, preventing buildings that would provide an abundance of jobs or housing. Any shift to the value of land will increase the incentive to build or sell to someone who would. But shifting taxes from high-rise buildings to the value of land on which they can profitably be built grossly increases the profitable height of buildings, providing substantially more places to live and work and more revenue for the city. Land rent in real estate is simply income minus what goes to workers and buildings. Land rent minus taxes equals the unearned income, which is what the landowner gets to keep. The selling price of land is based on the unearned income, like the price-earnings ratio in the stock market. Now, what I'm going to show you are not actual numbers, but close enough to reality to demonstrate the effects of the real estate tax versus land value taxation where high-rise buildings are profitable. Suppose we had this little 12,000 square foot parcel of land. That's a little more than a quarter of an acre. And after we consider the setbacks from the street and the lost space because of the heating system and different areas that you can't rent out, we've still got 10,000 square feet of floor space, of rentable floor space. And if this building costs $300 a square foot to build, that would mean it costs $3 million to get 10,000 square feet of rentable floor space. And if someone is willing to pay $24 a square foot per year, that would give us an income of $240,000. Now, of course, whoever puts up the money and builds this $3 million building is going to have to get as much as they would have gotten if they left the money in the bank. And if the current rate of interest is 5%, then whoever owns that building is going to have at least 5% of $3 million, which is $150,000. That's a given. Now, the guy who owns the building has to be sure that the building is going to be worth as much next year, so people will pay just as much to live in it or work in it as they did before. And we're going to have, in order to make sure that everything goes right, we're going to have somebody who will manage it. Call the plumber and the electrician, keep the windows washed, find new tenants, and collect the rents. And if that were 3% of the value of the building every year, that would come up to $9 a square foot. And so $9 times 10,000 square feet gives us $90,000. Now, that's everything, isn't it? But we've got 10,000 square feet. The guy who put up the building, he's getting $150,000. And the guy who's doing the maintenance and management, getting $90,000. And now we have 10,000 square feet of either places to live or places to work. Everything is fine. So if the guy who owns the land is a separate person, obviously he's not getting anything. But we're not worried about that, are we? Now suppose that we want to build a really big building, there's a thing called economies of scale. The bigger you build, the better price you get on the cement and the reinforcing rod and the glass and everything else, all the materials, up to a point. I suppose even the labor for a big job is going to be cheaper because they don't have to move their equipment in and out and so on. But my question is, which would cost more? This building or this building, if they're both exactly the same size? The high rise, sure. Because as we go up vertically, we need support. Every floor has to be supported by all the floors below it. And we need an anchor. Something to keep it from falling over. So we keep jacking up the roof, reinforcing the walls. How many roofs does a building need if it's 1 story or 100 stories? One roof. So that's a one-time savings, isn't it? Or a one-time expense, however you look at it, as you go up. So, what I'd like to suppose is that to keep it a simple equation, we'll forget that one-time savings with the roof. And we'll just say because each floor has to support all the floors above it, that every additional floor costs 1% more than the previous one. So instead of instead of $9 million, it costs $9,090,300 to build a 3-story building. Now we know that the first floor merchants are going to get paid a whole lot more because of all the people who walk in off the street and buy things. And we know that if the view gets better as you go up, you're going to definitely pay more for a better view. But I would like to assume, in the spirit of keeping it as simple as possible, that the same amount is paid per square foot for all the floor space. Now, I'm sure high-rise elevators are a whole lot more expensive to maintain. I'm sure that even the window washers get paid a lot more if they're up 30, 40 floors than if they're on the first floor. But it certainly is not going to cost more to maintain the reinforced concrete as you go up. And the building manager is not going to charge you more commission to get you a tenant for the 30th floor than the 3rd floor. So I'd like to have the maintenance and management remain the same for all floor space at the same amount that it costs for the first floor, $9 a foot, or 3% of what it costs to build the first floor. Now, supposing we can find somebody who's willing to pay $25 a foot per year. We've got a 70,000 square foot building. 70,000 times 25 gives us $1,750,000. And the building costs $21,640,000 times 5%, $1,082,000. Maintenance and management, 70,000 times 9, 630,000. And so the land rent is $37,970. Now what we want to know is this definitely the highest and best use, or what we're really concerned with, is this how we can get the most land rent? How are we going to know if 9 stories might be more profitable? We simply try out 9 stories. And we've come up with $821 less, because that last story, which you can think of as putting them underneath and jacking the building up, because that has to be strong enough to hold all the stories above it, it costs more to build, and so the interest on that last story that we put underneath is $821 more. And so we know that 7 stories is definitely the highest and best use. But if somebody is willing to pay $30 a square foot, then we've got 34 stories, 340,000 square feet of floor space. $10,200,000 in income, $6 million in interest on the cost of the building, which was $120 million. Maintenance and management, $3 million, and we've got $1.1 million in land rent. And again, I tried 35 stories, and the same thing happens. I get $386 less. So that's how I am sure that 34 stories is the highest and best use. Now, it's also true that you can't just go back every couple of years and add a few stories, can you? Not so easy. So I'm sure that whenever somebody builds a big building, they say, well, I expect the rents are going to be going up in the future, so let's add a few more stories. Even if we lose a little bit of money in the first few years, we'll be able to make it up. But obviously for this little demonstration, I don't know how much because it's all conjecture, isn't it? So just going on the income today, 34 stories is the highest and best use. But there's one thing I forgot in there. Forget that? Yeah. So, we look at a map of the United States and we see that the white is the lowest states, West Virginia, Alabama, California, and the worst, the lowest, Louisiana, at less than 0.2%. And then we go to the tan, the brown, and the dark brown, and we get Texas, and the highest one is Wisconsin, at over 1.8%. So it's from 0.2% to 1.8%. That's a big range. And then within every state, the counties all set their own tax rates, and every city and township and borough sets their own township. So they vary widely. I'm told New Jersey is extreme. And then New York has 4 tax rates: low-rise residential, high-rise residential, commercial, and utility. So obviously, who knows what is the story. If we're talking about Wilmington, Delaware, this 1.5% that I have come up with is probably low. Probably way high for Wilmington, because Delaware's in that lowest category with West Virginia and so on. But if we're talking about New York, it might be pretty close, except for the fact that every category has a different rate. But if I go with 1.5%, you'll get the idea how the difference between the real estate tax on land and buildings and the land value tax affects it. So I go back to my first example, and I see that the land rent was 0. So if we tax 1.5% of this $303 million building, where am I going to get the money to pay the tax? They're only willing to pay $24 a foot per year. I can't build that. 10,000 square feet of floor space never manifests, so people don't have places to work or to live. Not until people are willing to pay $28.50 for the exact same thing do we have enough left over, because of the increase in the income, enough left over to pay the real estate tax on the building of 1.5%, $45,000, and then we get 0. So this real estate tax added over 18% to the lowest profitable price of floor space. So the real estate tax sounds like a very small tax at 1.5%, but it's levied against the value of the building, not the income. And I'll get back to this in a minute. But if we can get $30 a square foot, you can see that we've got $437 in land, $1,000 in land rent. And the building tax, $372, 1.5% of $24 million. And that leaves the landowner $64,000. And what's the other part of the the real estate tax? Falls on buildings and land. So the land tax of $14,837, and the landowner ends up with $49,457. Now, somebody's going to ask me, how did you come up with that $14,837 for the land? Well, I guess we could say pretty clearly, the value of land is set. That is to say, the selling price of land is set by whoever has the biggest fantasy about the future income from that land, and the most money to outbid everybody else. And that sets the market value, right? I heard those stories about the Christiana Hospital and how the value of land increased 9 times in 1 week as soon as they found out that the Wilmington Medical Center, or whatever that organization is called, had bought that land for the new hospital. So there's no way that I can calculate that. But if I calculate it based on the unearned income, which was $49,000, and the current rate of interest is 5%, so $49,000 is 5% of $989,000. And that would be the sale value times 1.5% real estate tax, and I get $14,837, the land value tax. And I suspect that that's probably not that far off, because have you ever heard of anybody who actually paid the market value based on the assessment? No, it's always much lower. So nobody can challenge them. All right, so there we are. Now, let's make sure. So I put 9 stories up, and I get $1,157 left. So not only because the building costs more to build, but because the building costs more, the tax on the building is more on that last floor that we stuck underneath. So it jacked it up even more. And that's how we know that 8 stories is the most profitable height for the building. Now, I said I would get back to this tax rate. Here we saw that it's only 1.5% real estate tax, but it's on the land and buildings, and it's 88% of the income. That's phenomenal. But we say, well, okay, it's 88% of the income from land. Do we care if they take all of the income from land? The guy didn't produce the land, did he? What did he do to deserve it? So the tax on the building comes out of the land. No problem, except for one problem. It made 26 stories, 260,000 square feet of floor space unprofitable. Unavailable for jobs and housing. What does the federal government do when there's a recession? Federal Reserve do when there's a recession? Can't read my own writing. They lower interest rates. So, if we could take the current rate of interest and bring it down 1.5%, we'd offset the building tax, wouldn't we? And we'd have 340,000 square feet for jobs or housing. The city would get 260,000 more feet of floor space, and if they reassessed, which eventually they would do, with the lower interest rates, that would jack the selling price of land up, and the city would get $1.7 million more in revenue. So the city's happy, they got more revenue, there's more floor space, and lower interest rates, but who pays the price? Every person that puts their money in the bank, everybody buys a bond, every senior citizen is trying to live off a safe, stable income, are paying the price. So that these people can live, and look at this. Now the unearned income is $770,000. Whoa! So lower interest rates are a subsidy to landowners. But at 5% interest, we're right back where we started with 8 stories or 80,000 square feet. Now, what else do people do? What else do cities do in order to stimulate new construction? Every city has it probably by now. Last 30, 40 years.
Incentives?
Pardon me?
Incentives?
Yeah. And how about this one?
tax base.
That's a hell of an incentive, isn't it? So in New York, new buildings pay no taxes for 2 full years after they are completed, and then 20% for years 3 and 4, 40% for years 5 and 6, 20% more every 2 years until 10 years is up. Most cities, it's 10% every year. And I can only imagine that the expectation is that the amount that they can charge for floor space is going to increase as the taxes do, and they're going to be able to fill the building. You know, from day one, they might not have the tenants, although I know a lot of people start renting office space before they ever get the building finished. So with the tax abatement, the first 2 years they pay nothing for building taxes. And the old assessment, $14,000. So we've got the unearned income, if they can find those people before they get the building finished, at over $1 million. Pretty nice, huh? Tax abatement. Hey. Some people might say we're holding the land for ransom, huh? The city gets less revenue with than with the 8-story building for the first 2 years in New York, or the first year in any other city that I know of. They get the same revenue as they would have gotten from a vacant lot, which is usually what they're dealing with, a vacant lot or a building that's worthless. And they get more jobs and more housing. And after the second year, they get more revenue. But without the tax abatement, they're back to 8 stories. Now, people are willing to pay 20% more, $18.20, $36.20 a square foot. Well, then we can get our 340,000 square feet and everything is fine. But at $30, we're back down to 8 stories. Enter the Georges. The same $30 per square foot yields 26 more stories, 260,000 square feet of additional floor space for jobs or housing without any tax breaks or subsidies whatsoever. And if we tax the rental value of land at 50% of the potential rent, the city gets $550,673, and the other $550,000 goes to the landowner. So compare that to the 80,000 square feet with the real estate tax at 1.5%. And the city's revenue goes from $387,550, almost $62,000 more revenue from this one little quarter-acre plot. So it's not only the additional floor space, but it makes fuller use of the infrastructure and public services while providing nearly $163,000 in additional revenue. The unearned income goes from under $50,000 to $550,000. Landowner's making out very well if he has a big building. So again, as I said in the narrative, landowners who put their land to use are the biggest winners. But look at the selling price as well as the income. Here we go from $49,457 for the 8-story building, but under the land value tax at 5%, with the real estate tax at 5%, there's $989,000, so it's under $1 million. And the same parcel of land, the same quarter acre, at the same $30 a square foot, now the selling price, based on the $550,000 income at 5%, is $11 million. So it's 11 times what it was before the selling price. It was just around $1 million before, now it's $11 million. But if the land stays idle under the current system, they still pay the $14,000. Under the land value tax at 50%, they pay $550,000 for the idle land, and that would be a 3,611% increase in the cost of holding land idle. And you could eliminate the wage tax, the sales tax, and every other tax, and make up the revenue by increasing the land value tax. They get the same amount. And if we did that, I can't imagine any city that would have significantly underused land, grossly underused land. And I happen to think while I was putting this together, what if we taxed the potential rent at not 50, but 95%? The city would get $1 million, and the landowner would still get $55,000. That's more than they were getting before with the 8-story building. Capitalized at 5%, see, it went from just under $1 million to just over $1 million. So the landowner wouldn't lose a thing, but the city would get $658,586 more in revenue, or 170% increase in revenue. Now, there is a nice source of money for public housing, education, and those who are physically and mentally unable to take care of themselves, without in any way killing any jobs. In fact, while creating jobs, because we stopped land speculation. And at this rate, we compare the $14,000 to the $1 million for the vacant lot. So the people who hold their lots vacant would pay a 6,950% increase in the cost of holding the land, and that would be 70 times it would increase. And the land would have to double, the selling price of the land would have to double every year, or the land speculator would lose money. So, this is what people say New York will look like in the decades ahead, and this is what I say New York would look like with the land value tax. An orderly development, more jobs, more housing, and more revenue. Thank you.